Doctor Who hasn't had the best few years recently. I wish I could go into more detail as to why that's the case, but the truth is that I never watched the Chibnall era. In fact, I actually slowly started losing interest during the Moffat years, so when people told me that the Jodie Whittaker episodes were not good, I did watch the first one and I will admit that I liked it. I ultimately decided that I didn't want to force myself to watch something that I used to really enjoy. And as you can probably guess, the episodes that I used to really enjoy were the ones written by Russell T Davies. And it also probably comes as no surprise that David Tennant is my favourite Doctor, although I do like Christopher Eccleston, Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi as the character. So when Jodie Whittaker regenerated into David Tennant, something that I expected as Doctor Who seems to have more leaks than GTA 6, and it was announced that Russell T Davies would be returning to run the show, I was ecstatic. The best Doctor combined with the best showrunner, back at it for 3 monumental specials celebrating the show's 60th anniversary, all with the added benefit of some Disney money. What could go wrong? Well, actually a fair few things. I was a little concerned honestly before going into these specials. Firstly, were David Tennant and Catherine Tate going to feel like the same characters after all these years? Was Russell T Davies also going to be able to capture the same magic? How were they going to handle the fallout of the Chibnall era? Etc, etc. However, I was more than willing to give these specials their fair due, and I was cautiously optimistic about how they play out. So what did I think of these specials? Were they good? Well, first of all, I'm going to go through each of these specials separately because I don't feel the same way about each of them. Unsurprisingly, we're going to start with the Star Beast. Overall, whilst I do think this episode was really messy, I actually liked the episode. It has some big issues in my opinion, but the things that I liked about this episode were more than enough to get me through it. David Tennant and Catherine Tate have not lost a beat. They return to their roles like a well-worn glove. Not only is their acting phenomenal in this episode, but so is their chemistry. I will confess that Donna was never my favourite of David Tennant's companions. I always preferred both Rose and Martha, but you know what? Catherine Tate came along and made sure to remind me why Donna was such a beloved character in the first place. She was great in this episode and it made me sad that she would be leaving Doctor Who again alongside David Tennant. I also think Miriam Margolyes did a great job as the Meep. Forgot to mention that I'm going to go into spoilers for each of these episodes, so here feels like a good place to mention that. But Miriam was able to effectively switch between the cute cuddly Meep at the start of the episode and the insane psychotic murderer at the end of the episode. Although I will admit the reveal of the Meep being the bad guy was not unexpected. I also think that whilst the acting for our leads and the main villain were really good, a lot of the acting in this episode wasn't the best, especially for Rose. I mean, let's just compare Yasmin Finney's reaction to meeting the Meep to Catherine Tate's reaction to meeting the Meep.
Meep, meep!
Oh my god. Hello? I mean, wow. What are you?
I am the Meep.
You can talk. Oh my god.
What the hell?
It's night and day to me. You could make the argument that Catherine Tate is just such an incredible actor, so it's unfair to expect Yasmin to compete, but that's not good enough. They must have gone through quite a lot of people for Rose's role. This is Doctor Who and a lot of people would kill to be on this show, so there's no excuse for her performance to have been as flat and wooden as it was. It wasn't just Rose that let me down in the acting department, but a lot of the secondary characters too. Again, a lot of the line readings felt very flat and wooden to me. This could be a case of the director not giving the best direction, which wouldn't be surprising to me as the episode is quite messy. The pacing to this episode feels very rushed and at times it can feel like we're racing from set piece to set piece. The biggest disappointment for me in this episode is the writing. I wouldn't say it's bad by any means, but some of the lines of dialogue took me out of the episode. Now, this is the portion of the video where I walk on eggshells and try not to annoy both sides. One of the reasons why I was so apprehensive about these specials was due to how it was going to handle modern issues. People on all sides of the spectrum have knee-jerk reactions to this type of thing. I personally don't think a show like Doctor Who shouldn't be able to tackle these issues, but of course execution is everything, and sadly most writers are not good enough to add politics to their work. I also see myself as someone more in the middle. A lot of people do like to label anything and everything as woke. I mean, there were people calling the GTA 6 trailer woke because it made it clear that the main character was going to be a woman. The trailer is 1.5 minutes long. I don't think that's enough time to write the game off yet. Plus, I'm pretty sure that in Grand Theft Auto 6 we'll be playing as both characters in this Bonnie and Clyde situation. There are also a lot of people that have a go at you if you dare criticise something that happens to have politics in it, like with The Last of Us Part 2. Not everyone liked that game, it was very divisive, but lots and lots of people were called all kinds of ists and phobes for not liking a game that happened to have LGBT characters in it. For me, I think both of these reactions are bad. That said, I don't like when modern issues are used as a shield against criticism, and I really don't like that people aren't allowed to disagree on things nowadays without it turning into a shouting match. I was a little concerned that was going to happen here. Why was I concerned about that if I loved the initial Russell T Davies era? Well, it stems from the Davros change. Now before I go any further, I want to make it very clear that I have no issue with people disagreeing with me. To a lot of people, these are personal issues, whereas with me, this is just a show. I just hope that even if you do disagree with me, you can at least understand where I'm coming from. So in the Children in Need special, one of the things that happens is that we get to see Davros. Except this Davros doesn't look like the Davros that we know and root against. No, this Davros looks more like the food critic from Ratatouille. However, this wasn't an issue for most people. The special seemed to take place before the event that left Davros so badly injured, so him looking different wasn't a problem. That is until Russell T Davies says that Davros' design has been permanently changed to this new one. Now why would they ever in their right minds change such an iconic villain's character design? Well, because it's apparently harmful to people who use wheelchairs. Now this was really surprising to me. Firstly, because I never associated Davros with people who use wheelchairs. In fact, I actually do think it's a little weird if you did look at Davros and your first thought was this guy's just like Dave from down the road. As a kid, you know the age where you have the least filter and just say whatever, I assumed that Davros was half Dalek. And even when I did grow up and figured out that Davros was in the Dalek thing due to being injured, I still didn't see him as disabled and automatically go, oh, he's just like Dave from down the road. The main reason why Russell T Davies changed Davros' design was due to his belief that it implied disability was evil. Because Davros is a disabled man who is evil, which to me is just so silly. Of course this is Russell's show, he is entitled to do what he wants, but as a viewer I'm entitled to criticise the work he put forward and I sat through. Davros to me is an evil man who happens to be disabled. His disability doesn't make him evil. It's weird to think that the intelligence of the general viewer is so low that they would make that leap in logic. Especially when there are examples of characters that are disabled who are inarguably good, such as Professor X and Oracle. I don't look at these characters and think disability equals good person, so why would I look at Davros and think that disability equals bad person? I would maybe understand if people have been crying out against Davros being disabled for years, but as far as I can tell, no one has ever objected to Davros' design before. And even after this change, it seems people also don't see an issue with Davros' original design. If anything, disabled people have had a disabled character taken away from them, and I personally don't think that there's anything wrong with having a villain that is disabled. To me, I feel like Russell T Davies just overthought this one and made an issue out of nothing. Something I was worried would carry on into these three specials. For those who don't know, Rose's character is trans. It's an important part of the episode and I think that overall, the episode tackles this quite well. However, I do think at times that the identity politics in this episode became distracting, mainly in the dialogue for this episode. Like I said, there were moments that took me out of this episode. For example, the line where Rose called the doctor out on assuming the Meep's pronouns.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
Again, I think Doctor Who can tackle these issues, but the execution of it wasn't the best. It took me out of the episode because it felt like the line was thrown in for the exclusive reason of making a point. It didn't further the story or even develop the characters, it just felt like a reminder for the audience of how they should talk. This problem rears its head at the end of the episode too when the issue of the Dr. Donna gets resolved, which felt cheap and like a cop-out to me. Donna and Rose are able to overcome the issue by just letting go. And why was the Doctor not able to figure out such a simple solution to the problem? Well, it's because he's a man.
And you're not a woman anymore. She'd have understood all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male presenting Time Lord will never understand.
That's actually the reason he couldn't figure it out. Even though that doesn't really make sense, since Donna has always been a woman, so she should have been able to figure it out herself in the first place. And the Doctor himself has been a woman, so did he just stop thinking about Donna altogether? All in all, the resolution to Donna's issue was not well done, but overall I did enjoy this episode, although I think the cinematography could have been better, and this episode really showcased the higher budget that was afforded by Disney. The Meep looked great both practically and in the clear cases when its face turned CG when it turned evil. And the action set pieces, whilst rushed, did have a higher budget spectacle than what this show is used to making. Also, the new TARDIS design is fantastic, feels like a great homage and something new. I think the Star Beast was a decent first special, and if I was to give it a score out of 10, then I'd probably give it either a 6 or a 7. The next special was called Wild Blue Yonder, and it's probably the best out of the three. It's been given comparisons to classic Doctor Who episodes such as Midnight, which is a clear testament to its quality. This episode is a major step above the previous one in almost every way, and the only reason I think you could be disappointed in it is if you were expecting for someone like Matt Smith to make a shock appearance. Since I didn't go into this episode with those expectations, I ended up loving the episode. It focuses exclusively on the Doctor and Donna as they try and figure out the mystery of the spaceship that they are trapped on. Fortunately, the writing in this episode reflected the very best of what Russell T Davies is capable of. You have this compelling mystery that ends with a genuinely satisfying conclusion. The dialogue was flawless for this episode. Not everyone was satisfied with the flux being mentioned. As I said at the start of the video, I never watched Jodie Whittaker's era, so I didn't have this contempt for the flux or even really know what it was. But due to the dialogue and David Tennant's acting, I was able to understand the gravity of what the flux was, and in a lot of ways it felt like how the Doctor used to speak about the Time War. Basically, I had no issue with its inclusion, and the general reception to this line, based on what I saw, is that Russell T Davies did more of a couple lines of dialogue than Chris Chibnall did with an entire series. Honestly, David Tennant and Catherine Tate really carried this episode on their backs by giving fantastic performances as not just the Doctor and Donna, but the villains of the episode too. I really like how the Doctor's intelligence came back to bite him as the creatures were able to replicate him and figure out everything that he did. I also like how the Doctor figures out that the ship is counting down at the start of the episode. Truthfully, this is a really good episode that is capped off with a brilliant showing from Bernard Cribbins at the end of the episode. Everyone loves Wilfred Mott. It's a shame that Bernard Cribbins passed away before he could complete all his scenes, but we should all be joyful that we're able to see him one last time as the character, and like David and Catherine, Bernard returned to the role as if he never left it. Although I do love this episode, there are two things that hold this episode from being a perfect 10 out of 10 for me. The first is the CGI. If some of the dialogue took me out of the previous special, then it was the CGI that took me out of this one, because the CGI is not good. It's so bad that I literally laughed out loud a couple of times during the episode. It's annoying because I think the practical effects in this show are really good, but the CGI really made it hard to take some moments seriously. The other issue is the opening scene of the episode with Isaac Newton. It just feels really out of place and just doesn't work. This scene was also controversial as Isaac Newton had been race swapped. My opinion on race swapping flips a lot and my mind is constantly changing on the issue, except for when it comes to real people. Personally, I think that when you cast a real life figure, you should cast someone of the same race. Now you might say that this is a show where aliens and time travel exist, so it doesn't matter that Isaac Newton's race has been swapped, and perhaps I am overthinking it like Russell did with Davros. This isn't a documentary like that Cleopatra show, but Doctor Who is also the same show that had an entire episode dedicated to Rosa Parks, and there was also that episode where Bill faced racism. Basically, Doctor Who is a show that reflects our own world. By changing a real historical figure's race, you don't just erase history, but create contradiction too. It's clearly not an episode ruiner, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it in the comments below. My opinions are my opinions, they are not facts, and I'm more than open to being challenged on every single one of them. But anyway, like I said, this is a great episode, and I'd go as far as to call it a classic episode for the series. Now we get to potentially the most controversial of the specials, except this time it has nothing to do with politics and is completely down to the story. I'll talk about the bi-generation in a minute. First, let's get the other stuff out of the way. Neil Patrick Harris absolutely crushed it as the Toymaker. Not only that, but he nailed the English accent. I had no doubt that he delivered the goods, and I'm glad to know that I wasn't disappointed. In fact, everything about this episode up until the regeneration was incredible in my opinion. The creepiness of the Toymaker's shop, the references to previous Doctor Who eras, the Toymaker dancing around Unit Tower, a tower which looks way too much like Avengers Tower. I kept waiting for a Quinjet to land on the landing pad. It's all great. But then we get to the Doctor's bi-generation. My knee-jerk reaction to this is that I don't like the bi-generation. Ncuti's Doctor feels like a clone to me, and I want to continue following David Tennant's Doctor on Earth. Personally, I'd rather David just regenerated into Ncuti because now it feels like the main character that we've been following for years has been retired from their own show. I also just don't think that this is a satisfying end for the character. A lot of people talk about this being a good end for Tennant's Doctor, but this character isn't just Tennant's Doctor. It's also Matt Smith, it's Peter Capaldi, it's Jodie Whittaker, it's Christopher Eccleston, it's Tom Baker, it's Paul McGann, it's John Hurt, it's Peter Davidson, it's William Hartnell, etc, etc. We are saying goodbye to that character, not just David Tennant. Yes, Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor has all these memories and experiences too, but it doesn't change the fact that we are saying goodbye to the man that we followed all these years, and as an ending for the Doctor, I don't think it fully works. Mainly because it feels like David Tennant's being saved for a potential later appearance. Maybe that spin-off that they keep talking about, or maybe the 70th anniversary in 10 years. Also, it feels like a weaker rehash of the Meta-Crisis Doctor staying with Rose as 14 decides to live with Donna, and it in some ways feels like a bit of a disservice to Ncuti, as we will always have the thought of David Tennant in the back of our minds and wondering what he's up to. The bi-generation could definitely work out, and as time passes I may end up growing to love and appreciate it, especially if it turns out that 14 ends up becoming the creator, but as it stands right now, I'm not a fan of the bi-generation. I'm also not a fan of how the Toymaker was defeated. The man who trapped the Master in his gold tooth lost to the Doctor by failing to catch a ball. To use a pun, I think Russell T Davies really dropped the ball with this resolution. Firstly, it was very rushed, and secondly, it would have been so much better if both Doctors got to use their intelligence to beat the Toymaker instead of besting him at a game of catch. All in all, a disappointing end to what was otherwise a great episode. Also, the hand picking up the golden tooth was so similar to the hand picking up the Master's ring at his cremation, just another moment where it felt like Doctor Who was repeating itself. However, despite my issues with this episode, I did really like it. And if the Star Beast was a 6 or 7 out of 10 and Wild Blue Yonder was a 9 out of 10, then the Giggle to me is an 8 out of 10 episode. It's pretty good. Russell T Davies' return to Doctor Who has not been perfect, but it was good, and I am really excited to see what he and the rest of the crew are able to deliver with the 15th Doctor in the future. These specials have been really divisive, so I would love to know what your thoughts on them are. Do let me know in the comments below, and when you do make your way down there, be sure to tap the like and subscribe button please, it really helps me out. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.